The northern wind howled through the ancient pines like a chorus of tormented spirits, carrying with it sheets of snow so thick that even the most experienced wolves struggled to navigate through the blizzard. Alpha King Theron Ashford had ventured beyond the palace walls against the protests of his advisors, driven by restlessness that had plagued him for weeks. His massive black wolf form cut through the drifts with practiced ease, silver eyes scanning the white wasteland for reasons he could not name. The storm had descended upon the kingdom with unusual ferocity, and something deep in his chest, something primal and urgent, had pulled him from the warmth of his chambers into the frozen wilderness. His beta had called him reckless, his counsel had warned of dangers, but Theron had learned long ago to trust the instincts that had kept him alive through countless battles and political machinations. The scent hit him suddenly, cutting through the metallic tang of snow and ice with startling clarity. Blood, fear, and beneath it all, something achingly sweet that made his wolf surge forward with protective fury. Theron shifted mid-stride, his human form emerging as he crested a small rise, and there, partially buried in a snowdrift against the skeletal remains of a fallen oak, lay a figure so still he initially mistook it for a corpse. The woman was curled into herself, her thin clothing providing virtually no protection against the killing cold, her skin pale as the snow, surrounding her with an alarming blue tinge at her lips and fingertips. Dark hair, matted with ice and blood, spread across the white ground like spilled ink. What stopped Theron's heart was not just her condition, but the absolute absence of pack scent clinging to her, as if she had been scrubbed clean of any territorial marking, any claim of belonging. Without conscious thought, Theron shed his heavy, fur-lined cloak, the royal insignia catching what little light penetrated the storm clouds, and draped it over her trembling form. The moment the fabric touched her skin, something electric shot through him, a recognition so profound it staggered him backward. His wolf howled in his mind, a sound of triumph and desperation intertwined, and Theron knew with bone-deep certainty that this broken, frozen woman was his mate. The realization should have brought joy, but as he gathered her carefully into his arms, feeling how light she was, how fragile, rage began to build in his chest. Someone had done this to her. Someone had stripped her, beaten her, and left her to die in the wilderness like discarded refuse. Her eyes fluttered open briefly as he lifted her, a startling violet shade that seemed to glow even in her weakened state, and she whispered something so faint he almost missed it. Please. Just that single word, saturated with such desperate hope and terror, that Theron felt something crack inside his carefully maintained emotional armor. He had been Alpha King for nearly a decade, had sentenced wolves to death, had waged wars and brokered peace treaties, had held the lives of thousands in his hands with steady calculation. But this one fragile Omega undid him completely. He pressed her against his chest, sharing what warmth his body could provide, and began the treacherous journey back to the palace, his mind already cataloging the questions that would need answers, and the heads that would roll once he discovered who was responsible. The palace erupted into controlled chaos upon his return, healers summoned immediately, his most trusted guards stationed outside the guest chambers where they laid her. Theron refused to leave her side as the medical team worked, watching with predatory focus as they cleaned wounds that spoke of systematic torture, burns, and cuts that had been inflicted with cruel precision. The head healer, an elderly Omega named Margot who had served 3 generations of kings, met his eyes with grim understanding. She has been through hell, Your Majesty. These wounds were not meant to kill quickly, but to break her spirit over time. Whoever did this wanted her to suffer. The restraint marks on her wrists and ankles suggest she was held captive for days, possibly weeks. Theron's hands clenched into fists, his wolf demanding blood and vengeance. But he forced himself to remain still, to let them work. When Lyra finally woke 3 days later, it was to silk sheets and warmth, to the scent of healing herbs and something else, something wild and masculine that made her Omega instincts simultaneously relax and heighten. She bolted upright, ignoring the screaming protest of her abused muscles, her eyes darting around the unfamiliar opulence of the chamber. Where was she? The last clear memory was of Marcus, her former alpha, standing over her with that cruel smile as he ordered the final beating, as he told her that her bloodline would die with her in the snow. She had accepted death in that moment, had almost welcomed it after everything they had done, but somehow she was alive, clean, and dressed in a soft nightgown that probably cost more than her entire former pack house. The door opened, and Lyra's breath caught as the largest alpha she had ever seen entered, moving with the lethal grace of a born predator. He was devastatingly handsome in a harsh, angular way, with black hair that fell to his shoulders and those striking silver eyes that seemed to see straight through her. The power radiating from him made her Omega instincts scream to submit, to bare her throat. But something else, something deeper, whispered that this man was safety, was home. "You are awake." His voice was deep, carefully controlled, as he maintained distance between them, clearly aware of how his presence might overwhelm her. "I am King Theron Ashford. You are in the royal palace under my protection. No one will harm you here." Lyra tried to speak, but her throat was raw, and only a rasp emerged. Theron immediately poured water from a crystal pitcher, bringing the glass to her but not touching her, letting her take it with shaking hands. "Why?" she finally managed, the single word encompassing everything she could not understand. Why had a king saved her? Why was she in a palace? Why was she still breathing when death had seemed so certain? Theron settled into a chair across the room, giving her space, and the consideration in that gesture nearly undid her fragile composure. "I found you in the snow during the blizzard 5 nights ago. You were dying. I could not leave you there. As for why you are here specifically, I think we both know the answer to that, though we do not have to discuss it until you are ready. The mate bond." Lyra felt it too, that inexplicable pull toward this powerful stranger, the way her Omega nature recognized him as hers despite never having met before. In her former pack, mate bonds were considered sacred, inviolable, but she had also learned that nothing was truly sacred when power and greed were involved. "I have no pack," she said quietly, the admission feeling like swallowing glass. "I have no name that matters. I am nothing and no one, Your Majesty. Whatever you think you felt, I promise you that I am not worth the trouble I will bring." Theron leaned forward, his silver eyes intense. "Let me be the judge of what you are worth. Right now, you are a wolf who was tortured and left to die, who survived against impossible odds, and who bears marks of abuse that demand justice. Tell me who did this to you." If you enjoyed this opening, please consider liking this video and sharing your thoughts in the comments below. Your support helps us bring more stories like this to life. The weeks that followed were a strange blend of healing and awakening for Lyra. Theron assigned her a suite of rooms in the palace's east wing, appointed personal guards for her safety, and gave her access to the royal library and gardens. He visited daily but never pushed, never demanded more than she was willing to share, allowing her to set the pace of both her physical recovery and their developing bond. Margot, the healer, became an unexpected ally, her Omega wisdom helping Lyra process trauma while strengthening her body. "You carry yourself like someone who has forgotten what it means to have value," the old woman said one afternoon as she changed bandages. "But I see the way the king looks at you, child. That male would burn the world for you if you asked." Lyra wanted to believe it, but trust had been beaten out of her along with so much else. She began to share fragments of her story, carefully at first, testing Theron's reactions. She told him about the small northern pack where she had been raised, about discovering strange symbols in the Alpha's private study, about the night she overheard a conversation that revealed a conspiracy reaching far beyond her small territory. Her Alpha, Marcus Frost, had not been acting alone, but as part of a network, a shadow organization that had been systematically eliminating certain bloodlines for decades. When she tried to report what she had learned to the regional council, Marcus had moved quickly, declaring her delusional, dangerous, a threat to pack stability. What Lyra had not told Theron yet was what she had discovered about herself, the truth that had signed her death warrant. The documents she had found included genealogies, ancient pack records that revealed her mother's true identity. Her mother, who had died when Lyra was young, had not been the simple Omega widow Marcus had claimed to take pity on. She had been a descendant of the royal Omega bloodline, the Silver Moon dynasty that had once shared power with the Alpha Kings before being systematically destroyed in what history books called the Unification Wars. Omegas like her, carrying dormant abilities that could challenge Alpha supremacy, had been hunted to extinction, or so everyone believed. Theron sensed she was holding something back, but he did not press. Instead, he showed her his kingdom, taking her on carefully supervised outings beyond the palace. He introduced her to his inner circle, a diverse group that included his beta Adrian, a progressive wolf who openly advocated for Omega rights, and his head of intelligence, a sharp female alpha named Cassandra, who looked at Lyra with speculative interest that made her nervous. During a dinner with his council, Lyra witnessed the political tightrope Theron walked daily, balancing the old guard who clung to traditional hierarchies with younger wolves demanding reform. She saw how he navigated each faction, giving enough to maintain peace while gradually steering toward change. One evening, as they walked through the palace gardens under stars bright as diamonds, Theron finally asked the question Lyra had been dreading. "What are you not telling me, Lyra? I can feel your fear, your hesitation. Whatever secret you carry, it cannot be worse than the torture you endured. Let me help you carry this burden." Lyra stopped beside a fountain, its water frozen into crystalline sculptures by the winter cold, and made a decision that would change everything. "If I tell you the truth, Your Majesty, you may decide I am too dangerous to keep alive. The conspiracy that tried to kill me, it is bigger than one corrupt alpha. It involves members of the High Council, possibly wolves in your own court. And the reason they want me dead is because I am the last living descendant of the Silver Moon royal line." The silence that followed felt eternal, broken only by the distant howl of a wolf somewhere in the territories beyond the palace. Theron's expression remained carefully neutral, but Lyra could sense the shock rippling through him, the rapid calculation happening behind those silver eyes. "The Silver Moon line was destroyed 200 years ago," he said slowly, his voice carrying a weight that suggested this history was deeply personal. "My own ancestor, King Aldrich Ashford, led the campaign that eliminated them. The official records claim it was necessary to prevent civil war, that the dual royal system had become unstable. Are you telling me that those records are lies?" Lyra pulled a small object from the pocket of her dress, something she had kept hidden even from the healers, a silver pendant shaped like a crescent moon with a wolf silhouette at its center. She had found it among her mother's belongings, the only thing Marcus had, not discovered before his purge of her possessions. "This was my mother's. The markings on the back are in the old tongue, the Omega script that was banned after the unification. It is a genealogical seal, proof of bloodline. I did not understand its significance until I found the documents in Marcus's study, until I realized my mother had been in hiding, that she had given up everything to protect me." Theron took the pendant with reverent care, his fingers tracing the intricate symbols. His face had gone pale, and when he looked up at Lyra, there was something like grief in his eyes. "Do you know what this means? If this is authentic, if you truly carry Silver Moon blood, then everything our society is built on is founded on genocide and lies. The Omegas were not eliminated to prevent war, but because their gifts threatened alpha control. They could influence pack bonds, could heal or break mate connections, could command loyalty without force. They represented a different kind of power, one my ancestors could not dominate, so they destroyed it instead." Before Lyra could respond, the sound of running footsteps echoed through the garden. Adrian burst through the hedge line, his face flushed with urgency. "Your Majesty, we have a situation. Council members Blackwood, Frost, and Thornhill have called an emergency session. They are demanding to know why you are harboring an unmarked Omega, and there are rumors spreading through the capital about her identity." Frost. Lyra's stomach dropped. Marcus Frost. "He is here?" Adrian's expression turned grim. "Councillor Gregory Frost arrived yesterday for the Winter Summit. He claims to have information about a dangerous fugitive from his nephew's northern territory. Theron's entire demeanor shifted. The considerate male who had courted her with patience, replaced by the Alpha King who commanded armies. He handed the pendant back to Lyra, his touch lingering for just a moment. I will handle this. You will remain here under Adrian's protection. Cassandra will arrange additional security. But Lyra, I need to know. Do you trust me? The question was simple, but the implications were enormous. Trusting him meant revealing everything, meant gambling that this king was different from his ancestors, that he would choose justice over political convenience. Lyra met his eyes, violet clashing with silver, and felt the mate bond sing between them with fierce certainty. I trust you, she said, putting every ounce of conviction she possessed into those 3 words. Then Theron did something that shattered her remaining defenses. He dropped to one knee before her, taking her hand in both of his. I swear to you, Lyra of the Silver Moon line, on my honor as Alpha King and your destined mate, that I will protect you from all threats, that I will uncover the truth of what was done to your people, and that those who harmed you will face justice. You are not nothing and no one. You are my mate, my equal. And if you will have me, you will be my queen. The emergency council session was a masterclass in political warfare. Theron entered the grand hall with Lyra at his side, a deliberate provocation that sent shocked whispers rippling through the assembled wolves. She wore a gown in deep purple, the color of Omega royalty, with the silver moon pendant displayed prominently at her throat. Gregory Frost, an older alpha with Marcus's cruel eyes, stood immediately. Your Majesty, this is highly irregular. That Omega is a wanted criminal, accused of theft and sedition in the Northern Territories. I must insist she be remanded to my custody immediately for proper trial. Theron's smile was all teeth, predatory and cold. Counselor Frost, how fascinating that you would level such charges against my mate. Yes, I said mate. The woman you and your co-conspirators tried to murder is bound to me by the sacred laws you claim to uphold. Any charges against her will be heard in this court, with full transparency, and I believe we will find the only criminals in this room are those who participated in a conspiracy to eliminate the last surviving member of the Silver Moon royal line. The hall erupted into chaos, voices raised in shock and denial, but Theron's command cut through the noise like a blade. Silence. Over the next hours, with Cassandra's meticulously gathered intelligence and testimony from wolves who had been part of the Shadow Network, a horrifying picture emerged. The conspiracy was vast, involving dozens of high-ranking pack officials across multiple territories. They had spent decades hunting down any wolf with even a trace of Silver Moon heritage, operating under the belief that Omega gifts posed an existential threat to alpha dominance. Marcus Frost had been a minor player, tasked with eliminating Lyra once her mother's true identity was discovered. But the conspiracy had deeper roots, tentacles reaching into Theron's own court. When Counselor Blackwood, an ancient alpha who had served under Theron's father, was revealed as one of the architects, the old wolf did not deny it. We did what was necessary, he said coldly, his gaze fixed on Lyra with undisguised hatred. Your ancestor understood. King Aldrich understood that there can be only one source of authority, one hierarchy. Omega gifts create chaos, blur the natural order. Your father understood this too, which is why he maintained the policies we put in place. And now you would throw away centuries of stability for a female you have known mere weeks? Theron descended from his throne, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. My father, he said quietly, dangerously, was complicit in ongoing genocide. He knew survivors existed and chose to allow their continued persecution rather than confront the lies his own father had told. I will not make that same choice. The old order you cling to was built on murder and oppression. It ends now. Every wolf in this room who participated in or enabled this conspiracy will be stripped of rank and tried for crimes against the kingdom. And Counselor Blackwood, you will be the first. The trials that followed were brutal and exhaustive, exposing corruption that ran deeper than anyone had imagined. Several council members fled, rather than face judgment, while others attempted coups that were swiftly crushed by loyalist forces. Through it all, Lyra stood beside Theron, no longer hiding, but stepping into her role as both his mate and a symbol of the change sweeping through the kingdom. She began working with Omega advocacy groups, helping establish legal protections and educational programs, using her position to amplify voices that had been silenced for generations. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more supernatural romance stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. We upload new content regularly, and your support means everything to us. But the conspiracy was not finished. On the night before Lyra and Theron's official mating ceremony, she was taken. The kidnapping was professional, executed by wolves who knew the palace's security intimately, and they left behind a message written in blood. Return what was stolen, or she dies screaming like her ancestors. Theron's rage was apocalyptic, his wolf demanding immediate slaughter, but Adrian talked him back from the edge. They want you acting on emotion. To make mistakes, we need to be smart about this. Cassandra's network traced the kidnappers to an abandoned fortress in the western mountains, a place that had once belonged to the Silvermoon dynasty before the unification. The symbolism was deliberate, cruel, and as Theron assembled his strike team, he realized this was meant to be a final stand, the old guard's last attempt to preserve their vision of order. What they had not anticipated was what Lyra would discover in captivity, the truth that would reshape everything they thought they knew. Lyra woke in chains again, a bitter echo of her torture under Marcus. But this time her captors were not satisfied with simple punishment. Gregory Frost stood over her with several other old alphas, and their leader was someone she recognized from Theron's council portraits. Roland Ashford, the king's uncle, who had supposedly died in a hunting accident years ago. "You cost me my nephew's loyalty," Roland said conversationally, as if discussing weather rather than treason. Theron was always too soft, too influenced by modern nonsense about equality and Omega rights. His father tried to guide him properly, but the boy was stubborn. "So we have been patient, waiting for the right moment to restore proper order. And then you appeared, a Silvermoon heir, the perfect catalyst to expose his weakness." What Roland and his conspirators did not know was that being back in a Silvermoon stronghold, even one long abandoned, awakened something in Lyra. The fortress recognized her blood, ancient magic woven into its stones, responding to her presence. She felt power flowing into her, abilities her mother had never been able to teach her, gifts that had been suppressed by fear and ignorance. When Gregory Frost moved to strike her, mimicking his nephew's torture methods, Lyra's eyes blazed with violet light, and his hand froze mid-swing, his entire body locked in place by her will. The Omega gifts were not what the histories claimed. Not chaos and disorder, but balance and connection. Lyra could sense the pack bonds between her captors, could feel the cracks where loyalty had been corrupted by ambition and fear. She could not break alpha wolves, could not command them like puppets, but she could speak to the parts of them that remembered what packs were meant to be: protection, family, mutual support rather than domination. She reached out with abilities she barely understood, finding the youngest of her guards, an alpha named Thomas, who had joined Roland's faction out of desperation after his pack was destroyed in territorial disputes. "Thomas," she said, softly, her voice carrying power that had nothing to do with volume. "You do not want to be here. You do not believe in what they are doing. I can feel your doubt, your disgust. You joined them because you had nowhere else to go, because they promised you purpose. But this is not purpose. This is murder dressed up as tradition. Help me, and I swear I will help you find a real pack, a real home." The young alpha trembled, war playing out across his face, and then his hand moved to the keys at his belt. The chaos that erupted gave Lyra the opening she needed. She shattered her chains with strength enhanced by the fortress's magic and ran, not toward escape, but deeper into the stronghold, following instincts that whispered of something important hidden in its depths. Behind her, she heard Roland screaming orders, heard the sounds of pursuit, but she also heard fighting. Thomas and perhaps others turning against their leaders. The fortress guided her to a hidden chamber, its entrance sealed. with symbols that blazed to life at her touch, and inside, she found what the conspirators had really been searching for all these years. Records. Not the sanitized histories taught to modern wolves, but the truth, documented by Silvermoon archivists who had known their civilization was ending. The Unification Wars had not been about preventing instability, but about King Aldrich Ashford's refusal to accept that his mate bond with Omega Queen Selene Silvermoon came with shared power. When Selene had used her gifts to establish councils that gave all wolves, regardless of designation, equal voice in governance, Aldrich had seen it as undermining his authority. The war had been personal, a king's jealousy and pride leading to genocide, and generations of Ashfords had maintained the lie to justify their ancestors' actions. Theron found her there, surrounded by ancient texts, tears streaming down her face as she read her people's final testaments. He had fought his way through Roland's forces with brutal efficiency, and the relief in his eyes when he saw her alive nearly brought her to her knees. But there was also understanding, grief, because she knew he could sense what she had discovered, could feel through their bond the weight of his family's true legacy. "I am so sorry," he said, the words inadequate for the magnitude of what had been done. "Lyra, I cannot change what my ancestors did, but I swear to you, we will make this right." Roland and the surviving conspirators were brought before Theron in the fortress's great hall, the very room where Silvermoon justice had once been administered. The old Alpha was defiant to the end, insisting he had acted to preserve order, to protect tradition. But when Lyra used her gifts to reveal the pact bonds between the conspirators, showing how their network had been built on coercion and fear rather than true loyalty, even Roland's most devoted followers began to waver. Theron's judgment was swift and absolute. Exile for the leaders, with magical bindings that would prevent them from forming new pacts or spreading their poison. For the followers, rehabilitation and service, working to undo the damage their conspiracy had caused. The mating ceremony, when it finally occurred months later, was unlike anything the kingdom had seen. Theron and Lyra stood before their people, not as Alpha and Omega in the traditional hierarchy, but as partners, as equals, who would rule together with different but complementary strengths. The ceremony incorporated both Ashford and Silvermoon traditions, ancient Omega rites that had not been performed in 2 centuries, and Lyra spoke the vows her ancestors had written about balance, about power shared rather than hoarded, about leadership as service rather than dominance. If this story touched your heart, please leave a comment below sharing your thoughts. What moment resonated with you most? And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss our next supernatural romance. Tale. As queen, Lyra became the architect of a revolution that transformed not just the royal court, but pact culture throughout the kingdom. She established the first Omega councils, giving those who had been voiceless a platform to shape policy. She worked with Alpha allies like Adrian to create educational programs that taught the true history of their people, the lies and the genocide, ensuring future generations would not repeat those mistakes. She used her gifts not to control, but to heal, mending broken pack bonds and helping wolves who had been traumatized by the old system find new purpose. Theron supported her in everything, but he also did his own work of accountability. He publicly acknowledged his family's crimes, established reparations for packs that had been destroyed in the purges, and created truth and reconciliation processes that allowed survivors to share their stories. It was painful, exhausting work that earned him enemies among traditionalists, but it also earned him loyalty from wolves who had never believed an Alpha King could truly care about justice. Their reign was not without challenges. Traditionalist factions attempted several coups over the years, and there were territories that resisted the reforms, clinging to old hierarchies. But Theron and Lyra faced each crisis together, their mate bond growing stronger with every trial. They had 3 children, the oldest a daughter with Lyra's violet eyes and Theron's strategic mind, who would one day inherit a kingdom far different from the one her parents had found. On the 10th anniversary of the night Theron found Lyra in the snow, they returned to that clearing in the northern wilderness. The fallen oak was still there, weathered by a decade of seasons, and they stood together in the place where their story had begun. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I had not gone out that night?" Theron asked, his arm wrapped around Lyra's waist. "If some other wolf had found you, or if no one had come at all?" Lyra leaned into his warmth, remembering the cold, the despair, the moment when death had seemed certain. "I think fate has a way of bringing the right souls together," she said softly. "You were meant to find me, meant to be the king who would choose justice over tradition. And I was meant to survive, to reclaim my heritage and help build something better." Theron turned her to face him, his silver eyes still holding the same intensity that had captured her from that first meeting. "You know what I remember most about that night? Not your injuries or even realizing you were my mate. I remember the moment I covered you with my cloak, the moment I made the choice to protect you without knowing anything about who you were or what it would cost me. That was the moment everything changed. Not just for us, but for the entire kingdom. One act of compassion in a snowstorm, and the whole world shifted." Lyra rose on her toes to kiss him, pouring a decade of love and partnership into the gesture. "And I remember waking up warm and safe for the first time in my life," she whispered against his lips. "I remember seeing you and knowing, even terrified and broken as I was, that you were worth trusting, that some alphas actually deserved their power because they understood it came with responsibility. You saved my life that night, Theron, but I think I saved yours too. I gave you a reason to become the king you were always meant to be." They stayed in that clearing until twilight, two wolves who had found each other against impossible odds and transformed a kingdom in the process. The snow began to fall again, gentle flakes that caught in Lyra's dark hair like diamonds, and Theron pulled her close, wrapping them both in the same royal cloak he had covered her with all those years ago. It had been mended and cleaned countless times, but he had never replaced it, insisting it was a reminder of the night his real reign began, the night he chose mercy over. Indifference and set in motion, a revolution neither of them could have predicted. As they walked back toward the palace, their hands intertwined, the northern lights began to dance across the sky in brilliant waves of green and purple. "Omega colors," Lyra noted with a smile, the universe itself celebrating how far they had come. Behind them, the clearing stood empty once more, just another patch of wilderness in the vast northern territories. But for Theron and Lyra, it would always be sacred. Ground, the place where a king found his queen freezing in the snow and made the simple, profound choice to cover her with his cloak, to offer warmth when the world had shown her only cruelty, and in doing so, to change the course of history itself. Thank you so much for watching this story until the very end. If you enjoyed this journey of love, redemption, and transformation, please give this video a thumbs up and share it with others who love supernatural romance. Subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you will be the first to know when we release our next epic tale. Leave a comment telling us what you would like to see in future stories. Your engagement and support make it possible for us to continue creating these magical worlds. Until next time, may you find your own moments of unexpected warmth in the coldest of storms.